Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Casey Astrology. I am a card reader with the Cards of Truth system, and I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a very common placement in a lot of people's card spreads, and this is when the sun is starved by Venus or Venus is agitated by the sun. Now, these two conditions are what's called Lajjitaadi Avasthas, and I'm going to explain the meaning of that a little bit later into the video. But I was inspired to make this video after I briefly discussed the inimical relationship between the Sun and Venus in my Astrology of Prince Harry and Prince William video. So if you haven't seen that video yet and you want to check it out, the link will be in the description box below. Like I said earlier, this is a very common placement in a lot of people's charts, and the way that you can check in your own birth spread to see if you have your sun starved by Venus or Venus agitated by the sun is to look under the fulfillment strengths column at where it says sun. And if you see the word starved under the sun, then you do have your sun starved in your chart, and so you may have this starvation. That's the first step. It's to see if you have the word starved listed under your sun. The second step would be to check whether or not you have this starvation in your chart is to see if your sun is in the card of Venus in your birth card spread. The sun will be in the Venus card if you are a Libra sun or a Taurus sun sign. So if you do in fact have the sun in the Venus card, then your sun is starved by Venus. But if your sun is not in the card of Venus, the second way to check if you still have a sun-Venus starvation is to check if you have a sun-Venus conjunction, which means that the planet of the sun and Venus will be in the same card together in your birth spread. And when that happens, that means that your Venus is agitated by the sun. And for those of you who are new to astrology and have not heard of the term conjunction before, a conjunction simply means you have two planets in the same sign of the zodiac. They just have to be in the same sign. In Vedic astrology, we don't place as much focus on the exact degrees of planets, so as long as the sun is in the same sign as Venus in your chart, then you have this conjunction, and your Venus will be agitated by the sun. So an example of this would be if you have your sun in the sign of Aries, and your Venus is also in the sign of Aries in your horoscope, then you would have your Venus agitated by the sun because they're conjunct. But then at the same time, your sun would also be starved by Venus. So it's kind of a dual Lajjitaadi Avasthas conditioning going on here when you have a sun-Venus conjunction. But to put it into context, a Venus starvation of the sun, which is caused, again, by Venus joining the sun, happens in 1 out of 3 charts, while the sun's placement in Taurus or Libra will happen in 1 out of 6 charts. So this is why, as I was saying, this is like a really common placement in people's charts. So now I'm going to talk about the Lajjitaadi Avasthas and what that means. So what does starvation mean exactly, and how is it important? Well, if you look back at this section in your birth card spread, which is called the fulfillment strengths of the planets, you'll see a bunch of words listed for each of the planets. So these words can include starved, delighted, proud, agitated, secure, ashamed, and thirsted. These adjectives are what are referred to as the Lajjitaadi Avasthas in Vedic astrology, and this is what I'm referring to when I use the word Lajjitaadi Avasthas. And so Lajjitaadi Avasthas are described as good or bad habits by the tropical Vedic astrologer and my teacher Ernst Wilhelm. And he actually translated the Lajjitaadi Avasthas from ancient Indian texts, which were translated from Sanskrit. And so basically what the Lajjitaadi Avasthas are showing us is, are you in the habit of choosing what's right for you or not? Because there's an intelligence in you that knows what to do in every moment and what to say yes to or what to say no to. And that's basically determined by our planetary relationships and the Lajjitaadi Avasthas. So the good Lajjitaadi Avasthas planets are the good habits, and the bad Lajjitaadi Avasthas planets are described as the bad habits. And so essentially our life is trying to work, and life starts at the sun and finishes at Saturn. So each of the 7 planets has a responsibility to support life in progressing and ultimately in getting life to work the way that we want it to. So as we all have planets with both good and bad habits, life on Earth can basically be a step forward and a slide back experience for the most of us, or a mix of some things being on target and other things going nowhere, which can be really painful. And so essentially with the Lajjitaadi Avasthas, what we want to do is have a solution where we're replacing the bad habits with good habits, essentially. So when a planet has a starved Avasthas, as is in the case of the sun being starved by Venus, it's called a bad Avasthas or a bad habit planet. Now, usually we can look at an astrology chart and we're able to determine the other planets which could possibly be helping our bad Avasthas planets or helping with this sun starvation by Venus. And usually that's the case in most people's charts. You're not going to, for the most part, just see the sun starved and not getting any help from other planets. But for the purpose of this video, we're only going to be looking at the results of a sun starved by Venus, and as well as Venus being agitated by the sun. However, if you would like a more detailed reading where I can do a more personalized exploration of your birth card spread with you, you can get in touch with me on my website, and I'll have a description. I'll have a link in the description box below if you'd like to get a personalized reading with me. But for now, we're going to be looking at the cards and discuss how the sun starved by Venus can play out in all its various forms, as well as having your Venus agitated by the sun, which again occurs when you have a Sun-Venus conjunction. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the sun in Taurus or Libra, and then I'll go into having a Sun-Venus conjunction, because although these are both ways that the sun can be starved by Venus, they actually have very different results. Now, the first and most simple way that the sun can be starved by Venus is when the sun is found in the signs of Taurus or Libra. So if you have your sun in the sign of Taurus or Libra in your Venus card, then this starvation applies to you. When one has the sun in the Rashi or the sign of Taurus or Libra, this simply indicates that as an individual, you have a social destiny, and you have to learn how to have this social destiny while not letting that destiny get in the way of being who you really are and following your deepest inspirations. An important thing about the sun is that it matures at the age of 21, which means that around the age of 21 to 22, we usually have a big opportunity or event which allows us to recognize who we really are. Then Venus, our capacity to make long-term commitments, matures at 25, 4 years later. So there's a natural order to these things and these maturations of the planets. So first we find out who we are, and then we can find out what we can commit to. Finding out who we are has to do with the sun, and finding out what we can commit to is Venus. If we try to commit to something first without first knowing who we are, that's what we get. That's when we get something called a lost commitment. A commitment in which you will be lost. This is a common occurrence for those with their sun in Libra or with the Sun-Venus conjunction in their horoscope, and even people with their sun in Taurus. And because of this, Libra sun and Taurus sun people will often feel that the important people and relationships in their lives only love them for what they do and the resources that they have, in the case of Taurus people, and not who they truly are. And that's because Venus, again, is looking for something outside of itself, something that's the most worthwhile thing for this Venus, and it's looking for something that will bring it the most value and resources that it can then go ahead and use to build its life upon. And so this usually manifests in these people's lives as close connections, such as family, romantic partners, friends, or loved ones. In the Libra and Taurus sun person's lives, who expect them to kind of live up to a certain yardstick or a standard of commitment, and usually this can feel like a codependent or ball and chain type commitments. However, that's not the sun's responsibility at the end of the day, because the sun is a separating planet, which speaks to our individuality. Therefore, the sun can only be responsible for nurturing its own deepest inspirations and creative intelligence, which cannot be shared with another person at the end of the day in the way that Venus would want it to be. So the Libra/Taurus sun person may feel like they're being restricted or blocked from following their true inspirations because of the Venus people and commitments in their lives. And again, this is because Sun in Libra and Sun in Taurus, those two signs are ruled by the planet Venus. So who we really are gives us a thing that's hugely important. It gives us this thing called personal value, and so it's something that's worth having, essentially. And if we're going to be useful to someone in a sustainable way, we can only be useful to them as ourselves. And we can't really be useful to someone in a sustainable way as something we're not. Libra is the masculine air sign of sustainable Venusian relationships, and it's essentially I trade a value for something of value. It's all about the trade. It's sustainable. But it's only sustainable if it's who you truly are, and it's only sustainable if it feels good, which can only happen, again, when you're doing it because it's who you truly are. Taurus, on the other hand, is the feminine fixed sign of resources and self-worth. So when a person has their sun in Taurus, they usually have a lot of resources available to them based on their own talents, their resourcefulness personally, but they have to decide if they're willing to share that with the people in their lives or not. So basically, is it worth committing to sharing my resources with the world, or should I keep them to myself? It's essentially the dilemma for Sun and Taurus people. So the Sun first leads to Venus. The Sun is the foundation of Venus, and the Sun is the foundation of our Venusian commitments, and we can only commit to things based on who we are. then we know we have something true to offer and something that's truly us. And so it encompasses our full creativity and wisdom and presence. The sun's role is to creatively create through the agency of inspiration, is to make the world a more wonderful and healthy place to exist. Planets which focus upon the sun affect the sun's ability to live an inspired and creative life. So when Venus is conjunct the sun, the Venusian long-term commitments we make in life will usually serve as a distraction or deterrent to some degree to our sun's creative life. And the more commitment we accumulate in life, relationship, family, bills, etc., the less time we will have to feel inspired to create with our sun's energy. At the same time, however, the planets upon which the sun focuses on are those which the sun focuses its creative powers upon. So the sun can choose to actively and consciously only make long-term Venusian commitments to those people and those things who will further serve to help them co-create their inspirations. And Venus's role is to healthily obtain necessary fulfillment and nourishment from the world in a way that is not damaging to the organism or to others. The sun is not a sharing planet, and Venus is. The sun is not a win-win planet, and Venus is. So these are very important things to take into consideration when looking at the sun and Venus's relationship. So now I'm going to talk about Venus starving the sun and what happens when you have this placement in your card spread or in your natal chart. So Venus sees the sun as something desirable and as something necessary, as is Venus's manner. Because of this, Venus will attempt to obtain this from external sources. The sun is our creative inspiration, as I mentioned earlier, and its inspiration by its very definition comes from within and not from external sources. The creativity of the sun, when starved by Venus, comes therefore not from inspiration, but from what is seen as wondrous, not created by another or created by nature, rather than from inspired self-creation. So Venus starving the sun lacks this unquenchable fire within itself, and it will seek external forces to motivate it and to become inspired by. So as long as the individual's creativity is linked to some external creative force, the sun starved by Venus person can feel alive. But once that link is broken, there's nothing left for that person usually. And so when life does not work out in a fulfilling way, existing may feel hopeless to this person. And when life does lead to a fulfilling path, there will be great enthusiasm and strength at the same time for this person. However, the dilemma is, how long does any such path last that is not self-created? One way that this can manifest is that Venus starving the sun will cause a person to lack true creativity, and while they may appear to be creative and helpful, this will only be so long as something or someone they are connected to pushes them along, and not something that is truly self-motivated or inspired. Another way this can manifest is that the inability to be self-creative will cause them to be needy for the connection of a motivating force and to feel lonely or empty when no such force is in their lives. Yet another way this can manifest is that for people who have their suns starved by Venus, either through conjunction or by having their sun in the signs of Venus in Libra or Taurus, inconsistency can be found in all of their activities. And the final way you'll see this manifesting is that it can manifest physically, where a person's healthy vitality or resistance to disease will succumb much more quickly due to the lack of creative fire, which also enlivens the health naturally. So that's the sun-starving Venus. Now I'm going to talk about the sun-agitating Venus. So the sun will become agitated by Venus when you have a Sun-Venus conjunction in your horoscope, as I mentioned earlier. When the sun agitates Venus, the individual uses their creativity and intelligence on getting fulfillment from external sources, just as done by the sun-starving Venus. However, the people and the things which they acquire are not compatible with their needs for fulfillment. So there is a conflict with what they are doing and what they need, with that which they need being ignored in the face of what they are doing. If the individual wishes to be fulfilled in this world, the individual needs to recognize the difference of what they need to do as dictated by their inspiration and responsibilities, and what they need in order to feel fulfilled, and try to allow for some fulfillment in that area. Generally, however, the needs get lost in the face of what they're doing. So now that I've briefly explained all of these things, I'm going to give you two examples of people who have these Sun-Venus afflictions in their chart. So I'm going to start by talking about Amber Heard. So Amber Heard was born on April 22nd, 1986, and we don't have an official birth time for her, but we do know that she does have a Sun-Venus conjunction in the sign of Taurus. So Amber has her sun starved by Venus, and she also has her Venus agitated by the sun. And if you don't know who Amber Heard is, she's the former wife of the actor Johnny Depp. And the both of them were recently embroiled in a televised defamation lawsuit filed by Johnny against Amber. And the lawsuit involved an opinion piece which Amber wrote in 2018 proclaiming herself as a domestic abuse survivor, which Johnny claimed in his lawsuit ruined his career and reputation, and even though she didn't mention his name specifically. So Amber subsequently filed a countersuit against Johnny once he filed his defamation suit, claiming that his former lawyer defamed her as well by calling her domestic abuse allegations against Johnny as a hoax. So for those of you who followed the trial online or watched it on TV, you'll know that Johnny won the case unanimously. Based on Amber's testimony throughout the trial and her behavior during and after the trial through media interviews, I want to talk a little bit about how the Sun-Venus starvation and the Venus agitation correlates to her chart. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have a birth time for Amber, but we do know that in this situation, based on her date of birth, that she does have her Sun and Venus in the sign of Taurus. So based on this information, we can see that her Sun is automatically starred by Venus simply by being in the sign of Taurus, and her Venus is agitated by the Sun because she has a Venus-Sun conjunction, just to repeat all that again. So we'll start with her starved Venus. As I mentioned above, one of the ways that having a sun starved by Venus may manifest is that inconsistency will be found in all their activities. And the way that we watch this play out in Amber's case is that she was changing her story a few times in between trials, because she originally had her first trial in the UK a few years before this one. When it came to the accounts of the abuse that she suffered at the hands of Johnny Depp during her marriage, in the UK case, she stated that she and Johnny shared a blissful first year of marriage, for example, before the violence began. And also during that trial, she did not make any accusations of sexual assault against Johnny Depp, and she only claimed that there was domestic violence. However, in this new, most recent defamation trial, which occurred in Virginia, and it just wrapped up in the States, Amber stated that the violence actually began as soon as they got together. And in this trial, she newly claimed that Johnny Depp actually did sexually assault her with a glass bottle during their marriage, which is something she did not mention at all in the UK trial. Adding to these inconsistencies in her actions is the fact that she and her legal team could not produce any medical records for her injuries, nor any pictures, even though she was prone to documenting and recording everything during their relationship. And she also refused to provide her phone into evidence for the trial, and therefore concealed the important phone and text message records that would have been crucial in proving or discrediting Amber's own claims for her team, and as well as Johnny's side. And then, of course, there were also large inconsistencies in her testimony regarding her $7 million donation lie, which, again, these were some of the obvious examples of how a sun starred by Venus person can have inconsistencies in their actions. However, this will play out differently for all individuals and revolve around different themes in their lives. The common denominator of it all being that it's the actions and activities which these individuals take in the outside world that will usually somehow be proved to be inconsistent in some way. And it can be a very small way that's not very noticeable, or it can be in a large way that's very obvious, depending on what the rest of their spread looks like and some of the other placements and conditions of their planets in their charts and the Lajjitaadi Avasthas. Another important Sun-Venus aspect that Amber has in her chart that acts as an affliction is that her Venus is agitated by the Sun. And as I mentioned earlier, this occurs when Venus and the Sun are together in the same sign in your horoscope. When the Sun agitates Venus, the individual uses their creativity and intelligence to get fulfillment from external sources, much like the Sun starred by Venus. However, the people and things which they attract into their lives are not compatible with their needs for fulfillment. And so there's a conflict with what they are doing and what they need, with that which they need being ignored in the face of what they're doing. So anytime you meet someone who has a Sun-Venus conjunction in their chart, meaning their Sun and their Venus are in the same sign in their horoscope, you're going to observe that there seems to be a lot of incompatibilities within the relationships in their lives. And that's just something that will be a fact of life for them. Anyone with this conjunction in their life, they're going to have incompatibilities with their relationships. And this is because the Sun represents our kingdom in life, and Venus is our romantic relationships. So when a person has an agitated Venus caused by a Sun-Venus conjunction in their chart, it guarantees that the mundane relationships, as well as the romantic partners they attract into their lives, will be people from a completely different kingdom than their own. So a different background, a different social status, a different upbringing, a different lifestyle, a different culture. Just somehow it's going to be someone that's completely out of their world and out of their comfort zone, and this is going to be someone they attract into their life, usually through a relationship, a romantic relationship. And these people will somehow not be exactly what the Sun-Venus person wants in some way. There will always be incompatibilities somehow between them. And of course, we saw this with Amber through her relationship with Johnny Depp, who was already a well-known, successful movie star when they met and began seeing each other romantically. And through their joint defamation trial, of course, we were able to witness just how incompatible they really were for one another. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very common aspect in astrology charts. In fact, it happens in one out of every 3 charts. So if you are one of the people who have this conjunction in your birth card spread, don't panic, because this doesn't mean that all your relationships are doomed to fail. In fact, the Sun being conjunct your Venus means that you actually do desire relationships in your life in order to be fulfilled. And this is because, again, Venus is the planet that provides us with fulfillment in our life, and it's the planet of relationships. So usually through connecting with a spouse, partner, or at least one other person. However, the Sun's influence here just means that you will be making sacrifices in order to be in these relationships. And so the key to working harmoniously with this placement in your chart is to not set unrealistic expectations of your partner, and to accept that everyone, including yourself, has their perceived flaws and differences. So the key with a Sun-Venus conjunction in your card spread is to embrace these differences and incompatibilities which you will inevitably encounter with your partner, and choose to work with them to meld your 2 separate kingdoms together to achieve balance the Libra way. Because remember, the Sun is our kingdom, and that only we can create as individuals. So now I'm going to move on to my next example, which is John Lennon. John Lennon is a Libra Sun, born on October 9th, 1940. He also has other planets in Libra as well, but today, for the purpose of this Sun-Venus video, we're only going to be focusing on his Libra Sun and its results in terms of its Lajjitaadi Avasthas of being starved by Venus. As I've mentioned previously, the Sun is debilitated in Libra, the masculine sign of Venus. What this means is that once we make committable relationships, who we are gets limited somehow in some way. Committable relationships include things like committing to a working job, committing to a place to live or a working residence, committing to a working love, working relationship, things of that nature. Ernst Wilhelm, who's my teacher and a tropical Vedic astrologer, he describes the Sun being in Libra as kind of like this warm little loving prison to the Sun. And so a person with their Sun in Libra in their natal chart will embody this symbolism somehow with their actions. An example of such a person, of course, is John Lennon, who happens to be a famous celebrity, and I'm going to be talking about him next. So John Lennon was a popular musician, best known for being the co-lead singer and songwriter of one of the founders of the band The Beatles. And of course, you've probably heard of them, as they went on to achieve worldwide stardom and acclaim, which has endured over generations in popular culture, even to this day, due to their iconic songs. And the Beatles officially broke up in 1974. Now, when John Lennon decided to leave the Beatles in 1969, the official reason was because he wanted to focus on his solo career. However, there has been widespread speculation and long-standing accusations that the real reason John Lennon left the group is because of the influence of his new wife at the time, Yoko Ono. This has been fueled even further by the residual tensions that remain between the band members after their breakup, especially between Paul McCartney and John Lennon, who were again the main leads of the group and the co-songwriters. John Lennon and Yoko Ono went on to release multiple musical collaborations together, as well as other creative projects once he left the group. So the reason that all of this is significant to John Lennon being a Libra sun is because, as I mentioned earlier, the sun is our creative inspiration, and inspiration by its very definition comes from within, not from external sources. But when the sun is starved by Venus, as it is in John Lennon's case, the creativity of the sun comes not from inspiration, but from what is seen as wondrous, but created by another or created by nature. Or, as in this case, it's another person, Yoko Ono, rather than from inspired self-creation. And so we can say definitively that because of Venus starving the sun, he lacked the unquenchable fire which would have kept him in the Beatles, because the sign of Libra is ruled by Venus, and it's ultimately searching for a partner to create with. Meaning inspired co-creation is the goal of this sun rather than inspired self-creation. And this makes sense in John Lennon's case because he was first a part of his band, the Beatles, before subsequently meeting Yoko Ono and beginning a relationship with her, and then later leaving his band in order to become a solo artist, which freed him up to form a creative partnership with Yoko Ono subsequently. So he started out co-creating with his band, and then once that was over and he found a partner that he was inspired to co-create with, he moved on to do the same thing with a partner. And this is because he's a Libra sun, and it's a sun that's inspired by co-creation rather than self-creation. And so because John Lennon's creativity was linked to an external creative force, he probably experienced an inability to be self-creative, which caused him to be needy for the connection to an external motivating force. And in this case, again, that force was his new wife at the time and muse Yoko Ono. If he had not pursued that relationship and the co-creative energy it brought into his life, John Lennon most likely would have felt lonely or empty because no such force existed in his life, naturally, due to the influence of Venus starving his sun. So yeah, that concludes my 2 examples, and this concludes my video. So thank you for listening. I really enjoyed talking about the Sun-Venus starvation, as well as the agitation of Venus by the Sun. And in the future, I look forward to doing more videos on some of the other Lajjitaadi Avasthas. And if you're interested in having a reading with me, I will leave a link to my website, caseyastrology.com, in the description box below. And also, if you're new to the cards of truth and you want to know what your birth card is, you can also visit my website and find that out there as well. And I have a list of all of the birth cards on my website, so you can head on over there and check out what your birth card might be. So again, I'll leave a link to that section on my website, and it'll be in the description box below as well. So thank you so much for listening to this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.